Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And like so many fans, I am very excited to see Doctor Doom finally enter the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He is one of the most iconic villains of all time, and Robert Downey Jr. is set to bring him to life, first in Doom War and then in Secret Wars. While there's a lot to say about how that story will play out, I'm not going to focus on Doctor Doom in this video. Instead, I want to focus on Kang the Conqueror, the character Doom supplanted. Kang was supposed to be the next big villain of the MCU. Kang was supposed to be the one who would pave the way for Secret Wars. But due to a number of complicated factors, that's no longer happening. After the events of Loki Season 2, he hasn't really made his presence felt anywhere. He talked a lot about the threat he posed, but that's pretty much all he did. Add on top of that the off-screen scandals involving Jonathan Majors, and there's not much to work with regarding Kang. Now, I don't want to delve too much into what happened with Majors, but with respect to Kang the character, I want to make the case that he can still play a meaningful role in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'll even go so far as to say that he should be the primary villain in a future Avengers movie. But in order for him to work, both as a character and as a major threat, he needs to be retooled. Thankfully, the very nature of Kang's character makes that fairly easy. Kang has always been defined by having numerous variations of himself, but he's only ever needed one particular variant who really sets himself apart. And, in the spirit of not dwelling on past mistakes and missteps, here's how I believe Marvel Studios should salvage Kang the Conqueror. The first step in making Kang the Conqueror a capable villain is to address his connection to He Who Remains. By that, I mean that connection needs to be severed completely. But that's actually a lot easier than it sounds. When He Who Remains showed up in Loki Season 1, he didn't identify himself as Kang. The only time Kang actually called himself Kang was in Ant-Man Quantumania. And it was within that same movie that we encountered the biggest issue regarding the existing version of Kang. While he is an Avengers-level threat in the comics, he was defeated handily by Ant-Man in Quantumania. And that, more than anything, makes it impossible to present this iteration of Kang as an Avengers-level threat. Now, no offense to Ant-Man, but if he can defeat Kang in one movie, then the stakes just aren't high enough. But just because that variation of He Who Remains went by Kang, that doesn't mean he's the source of all Kangs. It could simply be established that Kang isn't a name, it's a title, one that is only earned when one or multiple timelines is conquered. And in this case, the door is open for someone else to go by Kang. And this is where the name Nathaniel Richards can enter the picture. In the comics, that's the name of the man who eventually go by Kang the Conqueror. And whoever Marvel Studios recasts, they need to make Nathaniel Richards the true heart of this character. That way they can simply relegate He Who Remains to someone else entirely. Now that's not to say that He Who Remains should be forgotten completely. In fact, he could actually serve as a catalyst for the origin of Nathaniel Richards. Because in nearly every version of his story, Richards' path to becoming Kang begins when he discovers time travel. That's what allows him to access the advanced technology that turns him into such a major threat. So in the MCU, it could be He Who Remains who provides Richards with his first taste of time travel. Maybe it's unintentional, maybe the events of Secret Wars causes major disruptions among future timelines. But no matter how it happens, time travel technology still ends up in the hands of Nathaniel Richards. Regardless of whether he seeks it, he needs to only access it once to begin his villainous journey. From here, I think Marvel Studios should closely utilize the source material. Present Nathaniel Richards as this brilliant but arrogant man who seeks greatness. Give him the ego of someone who wants his impact to extend beyond his mortal lifespan. And more than anything else, Nathaniel Richards' journey has to be different from He Who Remains. In addition, this journey can't just be referenced in monologues or expositions. It needs to actually be shown. Have it be part of a post-credits scene. Have the name Nathaniel Richards be ominously mentioned in passing. Make it clear to everyone that someone is up to something big. And not only is this individual distinct from He Who Remains, he has the potential to be much more dangerous. For much of his history in the comics, Kang has presented himself as more than just a conqueror. He is the master of time. His story, as well as the source of his power, comes primarily from time travel, not the multiverse. And to fully reinvent this character in a meaningful way, Marvel Studios must focus more on timelines and less on the multiverse. And yes, there is a distinction. Kang himself often embodies that. Whereas the multiverse involves multiple versions of the same universe, timelines are a bit more defined. They involve specific deviations at specific moments. And Kang derives much of his power and knowledge from understanding these moments and exploiting them to his advantage. This does still create variations of himself, like Rama Tut, Immortus, and Iron Lad. But these variations are still manifesting within the same timeline. And regardless of how Secret Wars ends, the next phase of the MCU should narrow its focus onto one specific timeline. And this is the timeline that Kang would seek to conquer. And how he goes about that will give us the true meat of his story as well as his character. Now, we don't need an entire movie of showing how he does it. We just need to establish that Kang succeeds at some point in the distant future. There should even be visions of that future in numerous movies, either in post-credit scenes or in passing references. And the foundations for the visuals are already there. Say what you will about the flaws in Ant-Man Quantumania, but it did establish a unique style and aesthetic for Kang. His soldiers and his tools are fueled by this hyper-advanced technology, and you get a truly unique vision for the future that Kang has successfully conquered. But the only reason he was ever able to succeed in that conquest is because of time travel. That has always been Kang's greatest weapon. It's why at times he seems unbeatable. Focusing on time travel would also help establish an endgame for Kang. Because once he's conquered everything within one timeline, the stage is set for the next part of his arc. Because now, he has something to lose. In fact, he has a lot to lose. He becomes the physical manifestation of the Conqueror's dilemma. When there's nothing left to conquer, preserving your conquest becomes your highest priority. And throughout his history in the comics, the biggest threats to Kang's conquests have always come from the past. It's often a natural byproduct of him relying so much on time travel to achieve his goals. This is what often leads him to clashing with the Avengers. And in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it could also create the circumstances that set the stage for a major confrontation. And this time, an army of advanced ants will not be enough to stop him. At the heart of every great villain is a compelling motivation. Thanos established his motivation in the first minutes of Avengers Infinity War, and that drove him to do everything that made him such a powerful threat. In both Loki and Quantumania, Kang did have a clear motivation, but I wouldn't call it compelling. When we first meet He Who Remains, he explains that much of his conflicts come from other versions of himself. In Quantumania, this Kang's primary motivation isn't about defeating the Avengers or conquering the future. It's just about escaping the quantum realm. And he was only there in the first place because of his variance. And that's just not enough to make Kang an Avengers-level threat. Kang is at his most menacing and compelling when his motivations lead to direct confrontations with the Avengers. And it can't just revolve around conquering for the sake of conquering. Marvel Studios actually needs to give some complexity to Kang's motives, just as it did with Thanos. And to that end, there actually is a good precedent to follow. The animated series Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes gave us one of the best versions of Kang we've ever gotten in any medium. In this show, celebrated by many as one of the greatest shows Marvel ever produced, gave Kang a very good reason for seeking to conquer the past. After a series of brief teases in early episodes, Kang's first major appearance presented him with a crisis. Something is destabilizing the timeline. His entire conquest of the 41st century is said to be wiped out completely by a single event in the early 21st century. And that event revolves around the Avengers. Using his vast knowledge of the past, he studies them, as any skilled conqueror would. And he surmises that one Avenger in particular, Captain America, is responsible for the destruction of the future. Shortly after he uncovers this, everything around him starts to collapse. This prompts him to travel back in time with an entire army, until on taking out Captain America, defeating the Avengers, and conquering Earth in the past, thereby averting his now destroyed future. Now, this isn't just a good motivation, it doesn't even seem inherently evil or malicious. And for the MCU, I think this provides the best possible template. It surely doesn't have to be identical to Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. The circumstances of both worlds are very different. But the stakes should be similar. If it's established that Nathaniel Richards has successfully conquered the future and adopted the name Kang, then it must also be established that this future is about to be destroyed by an event in the past. And that would create plenty of drama and tension with Kang preparing his forces. And as he travels into the past, he could watch as everything he worked so hard to conquer is just snuffed out before his eyes. And if he knows the Avengers are responsible, that would give him a very good reason to hate them with a passion. Because they would not just be an obstacle to his goals, this would be very personal to him. He would hold them directly responsible for destroying everything he holds dear. Once he arrives in the past, he would let that hatred guide him. I can easily envision the opening scene of an Avengers movie showing the Avengers at the height of their power. They're beloved by many because they're the ones who saved the world when no one else could. But then Kang shows up and informs them that they're no heroes. They're actually responsible for the total destruction of Earth at some point in the future. And in terms of details, it could take many forms. Maybe the Avengers spare someone they shouldn't have. Maybe they accidentally unleash something that ultimately destroys them, like perhaps a rebuilt Ultron. Whatever the case, the Avengers now have to contend with the idea that they're doomed to fail. And on top of that, they have to deal with a very angry Kang who also has a vast army equipped with 41st century technology. This is the kind of battle that would require the Avengers to assemble. At the same time, it would force them to grapple with what it means to be a hero. And that's usually the kind of struggle that brings out the best in them, while also leaving the audience conflicted about Kang. On paper, traveling to the past to prevent a terrible future is not an evil act. And if Marvel Studios follows the previous steps that I've laid out, then Kang's conquest of the past won't initially come off as the actions of a villain. But making clear that he is a villain at heart, that's probably the most important step. In the comics, it's no secret that being conquered by Kang is rarely pleasant. He's no Emperor Palpatine, but he's not Doctor Doom either. Kang never gives the impression that he cares much about those he conquers. Just because they live in this high-tech future wonderland doesn't mean that life is pleasant. If anything, that tech is little more than a mechanism for Kang to exploit his conquests. And that's where the stakes could become personal for the Avengers as well. Going back to the first Iron Man movie, technology is often presented as a tool with which to build a better future. Tony Stark was the embodiment of that ideal. After his death in Avengers Endgame, many might be motivated to pursue that ideal. But then, Kang comes along and exposes the dark side of this techno-utopian vision. He demonstrates how technology can be used for far more selfish ends. It wouldn't just offer a contrasting vision for the role of technology, it would even offer some real-world parallels. There's this popular notion that technology will be what helps humanity build a better future. And ever since the rise of AI, this sentiment has become a lot more mainstream. Yes, this technology comes with its share of dangers, but if the result is this wonderful utopian future where people are free from want and suffering, is that not worth the risk? Well, Kang could present the other side of that argument. Because unlike Tony Stark or Reed Richards, Kang is willing to cross every conceivable line to get what he wants. Advanced technology of the 41st century is just a means to that end. So at some point in the story, the consequences of this approach need to be clear. Perhaps the Avengers get a vision of the uglier sides of Kang's conquest. They witness firsthand what Kang does with these tools at his disposal. Again, the details could vary, but Marvel Studios already has examples from which to draw. In Guardians of the Galaxy 3, the High Evolutionary used technology to perform horrendous experiments on living creatures. And if they didn't meet his impossibly perfect standards, he had no qualms about destroying them outright. But Kang's exploits could be on an even larger scale. Sure, the world he lords over might look like a utopian paradise, but like every false utopia, there's a dark side. Being obsessed with preserving his conquests, Kang could use his technology to rob individuals of their free will. And if he can't control what he's conquered, Kang would just destroy it. That would affirm for the Avengers that they need to defeat Kang. It doesn't matter if his motivations are personal or sympathetic. A future in which he has conquered all is not a future anyone wants to be part of. It would firmly define the battle lines. It would make the stakes just as personal for them as it is for Kang. And would help set the stage for a truly climactic battle. And again, it would take much more than an army of ants to defeat Kang. Being the self-proclaimed master of time armed with weapons from the 41st century, Kang would be difficult to defeat. Given his motivations and thirst for conquest, he would be a legitimate existential threat for the past, present, and future. But wherever this battle plays out, it must end in a way that feels satisfying both strategically and emotionally. The defeat of Thanos in Avengers Endgame got people cheering because it had so many emotional elements on top of the raw spectacle. The Avengers undid his atrocities, and they all assembled to prevent him from committing another. Preventing Kang from conquering their future has to carry a similar dramatic weight. It would not be easy to match. That final battle of Avengers Endgame was a culmination of every previous phase of the MCU. It's still too early to know what emotions will be in play after Secret Wars, as well as what kind of universe will emerge from it. It also depends heavily on which characters are involved. While Kang primarily clashes with the Avengers, he has also had conflicts with the Fantastic Four and the X-Men. He's even had his share of rivalries with other villains, including Apocalypse and Doctor Doom. But since Kang as a character is defined by his mastery of time, his defeat must also signal the preservation of a better future. That's what the Avengers have always fought for, going back to the first Iron Man movie. And if Kang claims that they're responsible for leading to a future of ruin and destruction, then that must also radically change their outlook. Because that means defeating Kang is only the first step in dealing with it. In a sense, Kang would present himself as an easier solution. Just step aside, let him conquer the past, and the world will be saved. But it would also be a world in which everyone lives under Kang's tyranny. And for many, that solution is just untenable. But no matter how he's defeated, there would still be this new sense of urgency for the Avengers. And on top of that, defeating Kang is never absolute. No matter how a battle with him plays out in a future movie, it needs to reflect this sentiment. Kang can be imprisoned. He can even be killed or thrown into some kind of void. But Kang's very nature ensures that he can survive in some capacity. But as I've noted in previous steps, it cannot be through the multiverse. Any surviving variants of Kang must be a product of time travel. That is still the source of his power. Even if the Avengers defeat him in the present, there may be other variants waiting in the future, or even the past. And knowing what future awaits them if Kang ever succeeds, that'll ensure that he remains a major threat. Not just for the Avengers, not just for future Avengers movies, but for multiple future phases of the MCU. Kang the Conqueror is a great villain. He has been a major threat in the pages of Marvel Comics since the early 1960s. Marvel Studios had the right idea. making him the next major villain after Avengers Endgame. But in terms of character and story, their approach was just too flawed. Maybe that approach would eventually worked out had things played out differently in Quantumania. But as it stands, Kang is known in the MCU as the guy who lost to an army of ants. But if the Marvel Cinematic Universe is to have a future beyond Secret Wars, it needs good, compelling villains. And I still believe that Kang the Conqueror can be that villain. And once the multiverse saga plays out, I think he'd be in a perfect position to fill that role. Because at his core, Kang has always been driven to conquer the past, present, and future. But the Avengers are driven to save, protect, and preserve it. Now, I don't doubt for a second that Marvel Studios would love to make Kang a Thanos-level villain in a future MCU movie. These steps that I just offered are just one of many ways to go about it. But in terms of how Kang's story will eventually play out, well, I guess only time will tell. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and until next time, take care and stay safe.